What are credit cards and how do you use them? Credit cards, when you boil them down, are actually very simple, but most people get confused by them because on the open markets, there's all different kinds of credit cards for all different kinds of reasons and use cases. But if you understand the basics of how a credit card works, then it's very straightforward, and more importantly, you will be less likely to cock it up and rack up payments that you don't need to be making. So let's look at credit cards for tards and walk everyone through this, even for people who have failed their GCSEs. So what is a credit card? It's like when you ask Daz down the pub if you can borrow 20 quid for a Rizzler, except in this case Daz is a bank and you can borrow whatever you like using your credit card, or Daz card to stick to this analogy. Let's say Daz agrees with this but isn't happy with giving you any more than 20 quid for now. So is this 20 quid that you've got from Daz free money? Not really. Because in a month's time, Daz is going to come back to you and ask if he can have that 20 quid back, and you'll be expected to pay him back. If you don't have the 20 quid on you, you'll probably say something like, "Oh, sorry, man, I can give you 50p, but I super promise that I'll pay you back next month." Then, of course, the next month arrives and you still haven't got the 20 quid. So Dan says, "Listen here, you little cunt. I want 22 quid back now because you've pissed me off with this. And you're going to give me at least 2 quid next month. And if you're late, I'm going to slap another quid on top of that, you dickhead." So let's walk through what all this means with credit cards. In this analogy, the 20 quid on a credit card is called your credit limit. You needing to pay back at least 2 quid next month is called your minimum payment. And when you need to pay it back, that is your payment due date every month. The increase to pay back 22 quid from the initial 20 quid is called an interest payment, and how much extra you need to pay back is called an interest rate. Slapping another quid on top for being late is called a late fee. And Daz thinking you're a dickhead is called your credit score, and it goes down if you're a dickhead with the bank, or in this case, Daz. And if you keep asking for more money, you'll look like an even bigger dickhead, and your score will go down even further. And eventually, if your score gets too low, you won't be able to get any more credit cards. Credit card companies will stop lending to you, and all kinds of doors will be closed on you. Now, for people who are really advanced in the credit card game and in the debt game, there are methods where you can have a low credit score and get that fixed, and then get more credit, get more loans and credit cards. But that is a very advanced method, and this is credit cards for tards. So we're going to keep things nice and simple here. So now that we've explained that, all we've got to do to look at credit cards is scale that example up a bit. So let's have a look at the credit cards that I have. I have 2 credit cards at the moment. I've actually just applied for one today, and that's that M&S Rewards card at the bottom, and I got accepted for that. But let's start at the top. The Barclaycard Forward card, that's the first credit card I ever got 6 months ago. It's got a £1,200 credit limit. It's got a 33% interest rate. However, I never pay this because I'm not messing Daz about, or in this case, Barclays. You know, I pay the full amount due in full on time with every due date. And to make sure I don't miss, I actually get a robot to do it for me, which is called a direct debit. It's extremely simple to set up. They actually offer you to set it up when you're setting up the card for the first time. If you're spending within your means on that card and you've got plenty of money to pay it off, I would definitely recommend a direct debit. In fact, I would recommend a direct debit for whether you are doing the card in full or whether you're minimuming, which is something that I'll get onto in a minute. I don't spend more than £360 a month on this card, as 30% of 1,200, I believe, is £360. Despite the fact I have a £1,200 credit limit, I don't use all of it because you're not supposed to use the entire limit. If you go up to that credit limit, you start to get into trouble with the credit card company, and it brings your credit score down, which for some people is okay. Like if you really don't give a shit about your credit score, it's not that important, but it might be impactful if you want to rent a property in the future, or you want to buy a house, or you want to get a car loan, or anything like that. So it's just worth bearing that in mind. 10 to 30% spend is usually the acceptable range on a credit card. Beyond 30%, or let's say beyond 40%, it starts looking bad on your credit report, because then companies start looking at that and going, well, you know, he seems to be very dependent on this credit card. Maybe it's probably not a good idea for us to lend money to him. So the Barclaycard Forward card I use pretty much just for small day-to-day payments like £2 bus tickets and £4 coffees. Of course, you can use a credit card for anything you want, but it's a good idea to have one card for different purposes, depending on what your credit limit is on that card and what rewards it's offering, and just general conditions of that card can determine what you should use that card for. Now, the Marks & Spencer's reward card that I applied for today and got accepted for, that should be around about a £1,200 credit limit as well. And I got accepted for this card pretty much in 20 seconds because I've had my Barclaycard Forward for 6 months and I haven't been a dickhead with it. You know, I've paid my Barclaycard Forward off in full every month, and that's obviously reflected nicely onto my credit score. So I'm very favourable with lenders at the moment. 23% interest rate on this one. Once again, not planning on ever needing to pay this because I've got plenty of money to pay it off, so it's not an issue. I'll be using this card exclusively for my weekly food shop at Marks & Spencer's, because I'm not having mRNA black mold ridden Tesco chicken anymore. I've had Tesco and Asda stuff, and it's minging. I mean, Asda and Tesco stuff is fine if you're having like bread or peanut butter or marmalade or, you know, something like that, but don't get meat from Tesco or Asda. It's fucking disgusting. And with this M&S Rewards card, it's actually a step up from the Barclaycard Forward, because the Barclaycard Forward card pretty much offers next to no rewards or benefits. It's exclusively just used for building up a credit score, which is why I initially got it. But with the M&S Rewards card, as it says in the name, it offers rewards. Now, the M&S Rewards card is a bit weak. The only rewards it gives you is like 1 to 2 M&S vouchers a year. So it's a bit weak. However, for the cards that offer amazing rewards and cashback, you'll tend to find that they'll have clauses in there that say, oh, you need to spend at least £3,000 or at least £5,000 a year to unlock these rewards. And, you know, if you're not a big spender like I am, then you are never going to reach that. And so it's important to factor that into your considerations whenever you are applying for some of these more advanced rewards and cashback cards. So I mentioned earlier about minimuming or paying in full. Minimuming is a term I've come up with. I don't know if that's what the official term is out there in the business. But minimuming is where you just pay the minimum amount on your statement, on your credit card statement every month, whereas paying in full is obviously paying the full balance off every month, no questions asked. Now, you may be wondering how credit card companies actually make their money. You know, it's a bit obscure as to how they make their money. They make their money off of people who do neither of these two things. They make their money off of people in the middle. People who don't pay off their credit card statement in full, but don't minimum either. They just pay off what they can afford, and then they accept the interest rate payment on top of that, and they give that interest payment over to the credit card company. So that is where those companies make all their money from. And this is why I'm saying you should only do one of these two things. And once you pick one of them, you have to stick with it, really. You know, so if you've got plenty of money, and you're spending within your means, which is what I'm doing, then just pay it off in full. Don't question it, pay it off in full, and you can use the cards effectively as a budgeting method and as a way of racking up your credit score so that you've got access to instant credit whenever you need it. However, a lot of people out there don't have a lot of money, especially in the north of England. You know, most people around here are dirt poor and they haven't got a penny to scratch their arse with. So a good method for those people is minimuming, where on your credit card statement every month, it will say a minimum payment that you have to make. And that minimum payment will usually be something like 10 to 30% of what you've borrowed off of that card for that month. Now, if you do minimuming, it will slap on the interest rate onto that for next month's credit card statement. However, if you just keep minimuming, then you will effectively be spending within your means up to a certain point in the short term, and you won't particularly have to worry about that interest rate because you can, in theory, just be a dickhead, like we went back to with that initial analogy. You could, in theory, just be a dickhead and leg it from the bank and never pay them back beyond just the minimum repayments every month. However, of course, if you do that, you'll have to bear in mind that your credit limit would be fixed on that card. They wouldn't pump it up. So eventually you would hit the max limit on that card and you would effectively not be able to use that card anymore, which is why I said you could only really do that for the short term. Minimuming, I would say, is a very good strategy if you're unemployed and looking for a job. If you're unemployed and you're looking for a job, minimuming is exactly what you want to be doing. But just bear in mind that once you start minimuming on a card, don't ever stop minimuming on that card. Because once you stop minimuming on that card, then that is when you start paying off those interest rates, and those interest rates you don't really want to be paying off. So just let that card die out and accept a dickhead reputation on your credit score for that. But in general, you know, I would say for most people, just pay it off in full. It's not worth the hassle. If you're an advanced person and you're like super advanced in the world of credit and you know what you're doing, you're a ginormous mega mind, you've figured it all out, then great, that's brilliant. I support rinsing these fuckers of all their money as much as anyone else, but just make sure you know what you're doing, because banks and credit agencies are extremely clever and they know how to fuck with you. So should you get a credit card? Well, based off of what I've said here, it's now up to you as to whether you think a credit card is worth it for you or not. You might just be satisfied with using your debit card all the time. However, some things to consider are that it is slightly more secure on a credit card, because if somebody starts using your card in a fraudulent way, like they've nicked your card number and PIN or something, then credit card companies tend to be much better at solving that than if somebody just drained your current account and you was left high and dry that way. Also, they can act as an emergency float fund if you're ever in serious trouble in life. You can call upon your credit card to just max it out and rinse the money out of that. But obviously, that is an emergency strategy only. You do not want to be doing that normally. And of course, the reason that got me into credit cards in the first place 6 months ago is to rack up that credit score. If you ever want to take out a mortgage in the future, if you ever want to take out any kind of big loan in the future, you are going to need a history of paying back your credit. And the only decent way to do that really is through a credit card. You can get phone contract history put on your credit report as well, and like rental history and stuff, but really it's much easier to just use a credit card. You're going to spend that money anyway, so just dump it on your credit card instead of putting it onto a debit. And credit cards really are that simple. They're not that complicated. Don't be confused by all these APRs and acronyms and asterisks and all this stuff. Just ignore all that. Just get your credit card and do what I said here and you'll be absolutely fine.